My name is Linda Parker, and I'm 62 years old. I've spent most of my life quietly holding my family together, managing schedules, crisis, and emotions that no one ever really thanked me for. I always believed that love meant showing up, even when it was hard, even when no one noticed. But today, as I walked toward my late sister's estate in Portland, I felt a knot in my chest tighter than I've felt in years. My son, Trevor, and my daughter, Hannah, were standing in front of the chair that had been set aside for me, blocking my path as if I didn't belong. I could feel their expectation that I would turn away, that I would shrink back. But in my hands, I held something they couldn't see yet, something that had been waiting for this moment for years, something that would change everything. I wondered if they had any idea what was coming next. The living room of my sister's estate was quiet, almost too quiet. The sunlight streamed softly through the drapes, casting a gentle glow across the polished hardwood floors. But it didn't touch the tension that weighed on me. I noticed the subtle murmurs of distant relatives, their voices low and careful, like they were walking on eggshells around a storm that hadn't yet broken. Trevor and Hannah stood rigid, their bodies blocking the single chair meant for me. I could feel the message in their posture: "You are not welcome here." I took a deep breath and steadied myself. I reminded myself that this was not the first time I had faced disbelief or resistance, though it was the first time it came from the children I raised. Every birthday I planned, every late night I spent worrying, every scraped knee I soothed, every tear I wiped away, they were invisible to these two. And yet they formed the strength beneath my calm. I adjusted my grip on the navy blue folder I had carried here, feeling the smooth leather under my fingers, the weight grounding me in something real, something I had prepared for years. This folder held more than papers, it held acknowledgment, proof, and the quiet power of truth. I let my eyes sweep the room, taking in the subtle reflections of sunlight on the polished surfaces, the hushed whispers, the polite distance of everyone else. I didn't speak, didn't step back. I simply breathed slowly, feeling the rhythm of my heart, the pulse of every sacrifice I had made, echoing in that silent moment. I wondered if Trevor or Hannah noticed the shift I was feeling, the quiet authority building inside me. Their eyes flicked toward the folder once, almost instinctively, but they quickly looked away, confident they still held the upper hand. I thought about how often life had taught me to remain steady while storms raged around me. This was no different. I was ready for what was coming, and I had the years of patience and preparation to carry me through it. As I stepped closer to the chair, I could feel the anticipation thickening, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Everything from here on out would be determined by what I held in my hands, and I let myself savor that quiet, controlled power, knowing the next moments would shift everything. I often think back to the early mornings in our Portland home, before the sun fully rose over the Willamette River. Trevor and Hannah were still asleep, and I was already moving quietly through the kitchen, making breakfast, preparing lunches, and checking on the little details that no one ever noticed. I remember guiding their fingers over homework problems, reading aloud passages from books that were too advanced for their ages, and soothing tears I sometimes couldn't fully wipe away. My husband, Derek, had been a steady, quiet presence, but the weight of managing life fell mostly on me. When his heart failed unexpectedly, the house felt enormous and empty, and I became everything at once: nurse, as cook, accountant, and emotional anchor. And then there was my sister, Marlene. She had always been a spark in my life, barely 11 months younger than me, and her laughter used to fill our shared bedroom. But as her memory began to fade, I became her guide. I turned the guest room into a sanctuary, accompanied her to appointments, and stayed by her side during the nights she couldn't sleep. Trevor had once scoffed, saying she wasn't our responsibility, while Hannah shrugged, too busy with her own schedules to notice the small emergencies. I quietly managed. I never hesitated. Love demanded that I show up, even when no one else would. I think about all the birthdays I planned, the hospital visits, the scraped knees, the broken hearts, the nights I sat awake worrying about everything from overdue bills to minor health scares. Each one of those moments was invisible to my children, and yet it formed the foundation of the life they took for granted. And now, standing in that polished estate, I felt a pang of disbelief. How could the people I had raised, nurtured, and sacrificed for, assume I could simply be dismissed? How could they fail to see the years embedded in my hands? The patience and strength I had, cultivated silently, so that others could flourish. I gripped the navy blue folder tighter, feeling its cool leather edges. The weight, a reminder of the careful planning and foresight I had put into this moment. Inside were the notarized documents, the signed wills, and the statements that confirmed my rightful place. It was more than property, it was recognition. Validation of decades spent giving, supporting, and loving quietly. I thought about the countless times I had stayed calm while storms raged around me, the steady rhythm I had maintained in the chaos of life, and I realized that this moment was no different. The difference was that today, the stakes were clear. Trevor and Hannah assumed they held authority, that the polished oak floors and formal atmosphere gave them power, but I had something they hadn't anticipated. I had years of preparation, a quiet understanding of every detail, and the knowledge that love does not always demand surrender. As I took a slow breath and adjusted my grip on the folder, I reminded myself that every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of invisible care had led me here. And now, it was time to let the moment unfold. I felt a strange mix of anticipation and calm. I remembered the mornings with Derek, the nights at Marlene's bedside, the years of keeping everyone afloat. And I realized that all of it had quietly built the authority I carried now. This wasn't about anger. Not yet. It was about presence, preparation, and the quiet assertion of what was rightfully mine. I wondered if Trevor or Hannah would recognize it when the time came, or if the first flicker of unease in their eyes would be all the confirmation I needed. Stepping forward, I felt the familiar rhythm of my heart settle into a steady beat. The folder was more than paper. It was proof, leverage, an affirmation of a life lived with care and integrity. And as I moved closer to the chair, I knew the tension in the room was about to reach its peak, and that the next moments would change everything. As I stepped closer to the chair that had been set aside for me, I could feel Trevor's folded arms and Hannah's rigid posture like a barrier, not just in front of a seat, but in front of every year of care I had given. They believed they controlled the room, that the polished walls and formal setup gave them authority, but I had learned long ago that quiet patience often held more power than loud words or anger. I could feel my heart beating steadily, a rhythm shaped by decades of crises, hospital nights, and emotional storms. I let the navy blue folder settle against my hip, feeling its weight and texture beneath my fingers. Each edge, each crease, reminded me of every careful step I had taken to preserve this truth. The folder contained the originals, the notarized will, supporting statements, and medical attestations that proved my rightful place. It wasn't just property. It was acknowledgment, validation, and a quiet assertion of the life I had quietly built and protected. The murmurs of the relatives seemed distant, like a faint wind. As my eyes scanned the room, I could sense the subtle tension in the air. The way Trevor shifted his weight slightly, a crease appearing between his brows as if he felt something shifting that he couldn't yet name. Hannah's posture stiffened, the faint polite smile she usually wore vanishing, replaced by the slightest unease. Neither spoke, but I could feel the undercurrent of worry building. The first hints that the illusion of control was cracking. I reminded myself to breathe slowly, deliberately, letting each inhale ground me in the quiet authority I had cultivated for decades. This was no longer about confrontation or proving anything with words. The folder would speak for me. Every signature, every notarization, every supporting document was a statement that I had been preparing for this very moment. I had preserved the truth while others assumed I would remain invisible. As I shifted closer to the chair, I noticed the attorney, tall and meticulous, flipping through papers with a detached air. I knew he hadn't yet realized the significance of the documents in my hands. That moment of calm before revelation is a curious thing. It stretches time, heightens senses, and allows you to feel the full weight of anticipation. I allowed the silence to linger just long enough to make my presence known without a single word. For a brief instant, I thought back to all those nights at Marlene's bedside. All the mornings spent making sure Trevor and Hannah had everything they needed. Those sacrifices had shaped the steady, deliberate confidence I carried now. The folder was more than proof, it was the culmination of every act of love, patience, and foresight I had ever given. I took a slow step forward, letting my hands rest lightly on the folder, feeling the smooth leather and the faint embossed seal. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. Trevor's eyes flicked toward it again, a faint flash of doubt crossing his face. Hannah's shoulders tensed, betraying the slightest flicker of worry. The room felt taut, expectant, holding its collective breath, as if aware that everything was about to shift. In that moment, I understood that the next few seconds would determine more than inheritance. They would affirm a lifetime of care, resilience, and quiet authority. And I was ready to let it unfold. I placed the navy blue folder carefully on the polished surface of the attorney's desk, feeling the smooth leather settle beneath my palms. Every edge, every crease, carried the weight of years of preparation, of quiet sacrifice, of patience no one had ever acknowledged. I didn't rush. I didn't speak. I let the documents do what words never could. Each notarized page, every signature, and medical attestation was a testament to truth, and to the life I had quietly sustained while others assumed I would remain invisible. Trevor and Hannah's eyes flicked toward the folder, a sudden shift in their composure, betraying the unease they tried so hard to hide. I could feel the subtle tension in their shoulders, the way they exchanged glances that said more than any words could. I had expected disbelief. I had expected doubt. But I also knew that the moment they saw the weight of what I carried, their assumptions would start to crumble. The attorney, meticulous and careful, flipped through the pages, his brows knitting briefly in surprise as he recognized the legal authority in my hands. I allowed myself a small, deliberate nod, feeling the quiet satisfaction of control settling in. This was the validation I had worked for, the acknowledgement of a life of dedication and care. I thought about every hospital night, every birthday planned alone, every time I had guided them through small and large challenges. Always invisible, always quiet, always present. I sensed that Trevor felt it first, a faint crease of worry forming on his forehead, as if he realized he had underestimated the woman he had grown up with. Hannah's posture stiffened, the half-smile she usually wore vanishing, replaced by something harder to read, a flicker of uncertainty, a recognition she hadn't anticipated. They had assumed control, assumed authority, assumed my presence could be dismissed. They had not accounted for foresight, for preparation, for a lifetime of quietly safeguarding what mattered. As I shifted the folder slightly, letting the light catch the embossed seal, I felt a quiet pulse of triumph. Not triumph over my children, not vengeance, but the calm satisfaction of justice unfolding in its own deliberate way. Everything they thought they controlled was now bound by truth and law. And I was the quiet force, ensuring it would be recognized. I reflected on the years that had brought me here, the mornings I rose before the sun, the nights spent by Marlene's side, the countless times I had held my family together while remaining unseen. The folder in my hands was no longer just paper. It was authority, affirmation, and acknowledgement. It was the culmination of a life lived with care, integrity, and foresight. And as I leaned back slightly, allowing the room to absorb the shift, I realized that this moment, this silent revelation, had already changed everything. The balance of power, the recognition of dedication, and the acknowledgement of truth had shifted quietly, irrevocably, in my favor. The next steps would unfold. But the first act of justice, the one born from patience, preparation, and unwavering presence, was already complete. After the initial tension settled, I felt a calmness I hadn't experienced in years. The folder, once a shield against disbelief and dismissal, now felt like a symbol of foresight and clarity. I had ensured that everything my sister wanted, everything she had entrusted to me, would be honored. And in doing so, I had quietly reclaimed the authority that had always been mine. I thought about Claire, my cousin's granddaughter, who had been a steadfast presence throughout my life. She had shown up without expectation, offered loyalty, and displayed a quiet integrity that mattered more than any legal claim. I made sure that a portion of the estate would be entrusted to her care, a reward for consistency and honesty. Watching her read the notes I had written, carefully explaining the portions of the estate she would inherit, and the values behind the decision, I felt a warmth that transcended legal authority. This was recognition, not obligation, a small but profound validation of the life I had quietly led. Turning back to Trevor and Hannah, I noticed a subtle shift. Their confidence had diminished, replaced by the quiet awareness that they had misjudged, not only me but the years of care I had given unacknowledged. I didn't feel triumphant. Not in a way that required them to see it. I felt clarity. The satisfaction of knowing that boundaries had been set and that respect would now be inherent, not demanded. As I made tea in the quiet of the estate kitchen, I reflected on everything that had brought me here, the long nights, the early mornings, the moments of invisible guidance and support. Each act had built a foundation, not just for the family, but for my own integrity. I realized that standing firm in the face of disregard didn't diminish love, it affirmed it. I had given freely without expectation. And now, at last, the acknowledgement had come in a form that mattered. I allowed myself to sit in the living room, letting the muted Portland sunlight filter through the curtains. The house, once heavy with tension and unspoken conflict, now felt aligned with the life I had lived. The folder rested beside me, no longer a shield or a tool of assertion, but a quiet reminder of foresight, planning, and the dignity I had preserved. And in that moment, I understood fully that love and loyalty could coexist with self-respect. Recognition need not be loud, it could be deliberate, steady, and lasting. I wondered how often we overlook those who give without notice, those whose patience and integrity quietly shape the lives around them. This was my moment, my affirmation, and a reminder that standing firm for what is right can bring a peace deeper than any confrontation ever could. Sitting quietly in the soft Portland light, I let myself reflect on everything that had just unfolded. For decades, I had given my time, my energy, and my care without expecting recognition, believing that love was enough. Yet here I was, finally feeling the weight of acknowledgement, not through applause or gratitude, but through the quiet understanding that comes when truth and foresight are honored. I realized that standing up for myself did not make me less loving, it made me whole. And it reminded me that integrity and boundaries can coexist with compassion. Watching Claire absorb the responsibility I entrusted to her, I felt a deep sense of peace. Her steady presence, her loyalty, and her quiet reliability reminded me that life rewards consistency and sincerity, even when those qualities go unnoticed by others. I thought about Trevor and Hannah, and I wondered if they would ever understand the full measure of what had been given to them. Not in dollars or property, but in years of unwavering care and presence. I wanted anyone listening to hear this: never underestimate the quiet strength of those who give without notice. Recognition may not come immediately, and it may not always come from the people you expect, but the value of your integrity, your patience, and your foresight endures. If this story resonates with you, take a moment to reflect on the quiet sacrifices in your own life and the people who may never have thanked you. And if it moved you in any way, I invite you to like, share, and leave a comment about your experiences. Because sometimes the most meaningful stories are the ones we carry in our hearts, waiting to be seen. Peace and clarity come not from confrontation, but from the steadfast courage to stand firm in truth and love. Even when the world tries to dismiss you,